Yeah, so it's been a while. I've been very busy, both before Meridian and then after. Post Meridian is always a little bit crazy. Um, there are two big projects that I'm very into at the moment. The one that I've been working on the most though recently is this small big small update. For the uninitiated, we have small.xyz. This is my generative AI multi-model experiment vibe code project that I built a few months ago, and it's just we have so many of these now. Smoles, I think there's like 3,000 or 4,000 of these things now. But it's a sing-song AI art. So if we let's go to XLM Fish Swim. You basically put in a relatively basic prompt, and then from that prompt, it then generates a pixelated image. I found a really good AI model for making pixel art that I adore. So it makes a little graphic, and then another model takes the graphic and combines it with the prompt and generates some additional, essentially augments your prompt to try and help fill it out with a bit more information, which will ultimately help make a set of lyrics. So this is all going through a couple of different models, but through Cloudflare Workers, they have a newish workflow standard, which allows kind of building out these really long running prompts that may have multiple errors and how to handle them, because with each of these AI you may get rate limits or errors and have to switch over to either a different model or a different service. I have multiple models that will generate descriptions, multiple models that will generate lyrics, multiple models that will generate songs, and there's a Cloudflare workflows feature that handles this really, really nicely. So if you're unfamiliar with Cloudflare at all, definitely look into Cloudflare, but the Cloudflare workflows feature is really nice. But was just curious. Originally it was just an experiment to try and use the Cloudflare workflows, and specifically with multi-AI model flows, and then just learning how to tweak AI models to get it to produce outputs that I was happy with. Why is my camera off? Hello, everybody. It's good to see you. So then it goes to this lyrics model. The lyrics model then actually goes through a not safe for work model, which actually takes the lyrics, the description, the image, the prompt, and ensures that it doesn't cross any nefarious boundaries. And then it goes to a song model, which generates the song. The idea was just kind of to experiment with AI, but it turns out that it's actually a ton of fun and it works pretty well. So I always knew that I wanted to tie it into Stellar a bit more, but it wasn't particularly clear how I wanted to do that. I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off and say I'm not a huge fan of NFTs. I don't know that it's not the way that I like to consume artwork or to collect it. I would rather speculate on the pieces of work that I create, but both kind of on the one hand supporting the artist, but on the other hand also if I wanted to sell it or speculate on it, I certainly could. So there's this application. I guess it was always like, I don't know, I guess I could turn them into NFTs, but I'm not super keen on the idea. I hate IPFS. I'm not a big fan of the collect an NFT, hold it, and gatekeep on price for other people. And so now it's not an NFT, it's like a 1 of 1,000 or something like that. And people have tried different models of this, and some of them work and some of them are stupid. That's the wonderful world of Web3 that we live in, lots of different experiments. But one of the more recent experiments that I very much am into, and I'm at the risk of who knows what's going to be on the homepage, load up Zora. Zora is like a coin tent, I guess, social media platform where every single piece of content is its own coin. And it's a It's actually kind of complex. It operates off of a Uniswap v4 model. So every single piece of content is its own Uniswap v4 AMM pool. There's a lot of Zora documentation on how exactly this works, but it's a really neat model. Essentially, the way that it works is 1 billion new tokens get minted every single time a piece of content is created. 10 million of those tokens, so 1%, goes to the creator, and the rest of the 990 million go into a brand new Uniswap v4 pool. The idea of going into that pool is then that as more collectors enter, those who are earlier, their share of tokens increases in value. And then if you ever want to go and sell, you don't have to sell like an NFT all of the artwork. You can sell a portion. So when I go in and I'm like the 12th or 20th buyer, I may get 5 million or 150,000 of these tokens that kind of represent my share in that piece of content. And then at a later date or whenever, I can turn around and sell those shares of that artwork back into the AMM. So it's a kind of interesting financial model, both for pricing artwork and then ensuring that you can still like maintain ownership over the pieces of art that you or content that you liked or collected, while still having some sort of financial incentive to both collect and then to promote that artist, that artwork. So that's one piece of it. There are other pieces though. With the Uniswap v4, and this is where I'm going to spend a bit of my time, so lock in. The AMM pool itself, well, let me talk about the fees. So there's I think it's 5% on Zora gets taken as a fee on both sides of the trade, whether you're buying into the content or selling out of the content. 5% of that transaction gets split between a couple of different addresses. One being the creator of the content, one being the referrer of the artist, one being there's an option to actually create a referrer for the trade. Then there's a platform fee that goes to Zora, and then there's a fee that goes to, I think, the matching engine or something. So I think there's 5 different addresses that all get a percentage of that 5%. Which is amazing because rather than only getting your tokens up front and then hoping the value increases, you're actually getting these microtransactions as the artist. If you recommended, the artist joined. In my case, I'm going to switch back to the small example. If I recommend an artist to small and they use my link, then anytime a new small gets minted that they created, I will get referral payments in these like microtransactions anytime one of their smalls is made. So I, as an artist referrer, get paid in these microtransactions. The creator also gets paid those microtransactions. And there's also trade referrals. So like, let's say you recommend a specific piece of work, a specific small, you recommend it, and people end up, creating an account, adding their kale, and buying into collecting that piece of art. You as the referrer for the trade will also make a microtransaction. So you don't only have to have the token, you can also just participate and get these microtransactions as you recommend artists, recommend traders, are yourself a creator. So it's like this little dopamine hit of getting these microtransactions as your artwork is sold. So that's pretty cool. And that all exists in Zora. This does not exist. There's no contract. There wasn't, haha, hint, hint, anything in Stellar like this, because all of the AMMs that Stellar, even in the smart contract realm, really only has 2 AMMs right now. One is the constant product ones, these 50-50 double-sided constant product pools. This is the one that we have on Classic Stellar, and then SoraSwap is this way. I think there was one other I can't remember the name of, but most pools are just these 50-50 constant product pools. And then we do have the Comet pool, which like Blend uses for their USDC backstop module. That's an 80-20 pool. And then Comet also supports single-sided pools. A single-sided pool essentially says I can purchase in or buy out of an AMM pool without having to supply both sides of the pool. Now that math, even in the single-sided, that math is handled automatically in the back end. So technically it's still double-sided, but from a user's experience, they don't have to actually hold both a balance of, in this case, the small token and kale. So it can operate as like this distribution of a token when a pool is really heavily weighted on one side, which in the case of Zora or Small, it is. So when I say heavily weighted, right, most pools are pretty balanced, at least in value on both sides of the pool, where you've got, XLM on one side and USDC on the other. They both have large deposits, and so price movements are really small as you buy in and buy out of either side. In a model like this, when the pool is just getting started, I don't want the creator to have to deposit like 100,000 kale in order to mint a small. I want them to only have to deposit a really minimal amount and then have the 1 billion, or I guess 990 million small tokens over on the other side. So it's heavily weighted on one side. And then the idea being, as users come in, right, they don't have small. They want that small artwork, but they can't supply it because they don't have any. And it's kind of like a distribution. We need to get small out into the world first. And that's, you have to deposit kale and then you get small out the other side. The problem is with all of the AMM models that exist out there, either in Stellar or just generally, the intention is that an AMM pool is not really meant to be used, at least the math by itself is not meant to be like a distribution for an AMM pool or for a token, for one side of the token. And so that is where we run into this like issue of we have to somehow throttle the distribution of the one side first. For example, if I didn't do this, I think I might have a graphic here. Let me see if I find this. Yeah, I think I've got a graphic. Oh, shoot. Oh, it buried. Oh, why is it not let me click on it? Strange. Anyway, here's the graphic. So it's even worse. So this has a couple of different fees, and we'll get to what this fee actually means in a minute. But this is the distribution. This would be test would be like the small token. So let's pretend like we're minting XLM fish, right? And so XLM fish is going to be on one side and kale is going to be on the other side. With kale, so loosely, like there's no kale really in this pool. I have it right now set to 100 kale has to get put into one side, and 1,990 million test or XLM fish token go on the other side. The first like 10 traders would drain almost, it would be like 98% of all of the XLM fish would get distributed. So 10 trades in, and basically after that, nobody's getting any test. And so those first 5 traders are going to earn basically everything. And so the incentive is, yes, you want to be very early, but because nobody would really want to get in after that because there's no incentive, because you're not going to be getting anything, you'd have 5 people trade in, nobody else buy. And so those first 5 are technically never going to get anything because nobody has any incentive to get in afterwards. And so somehow you have to soften this curve where it's a much gentler curve of distribution while still reaching some high value before you reach an asymptote of whatever that kind of, we have this many to mint, but we won't quite distribute all of those before the pool essentially gets balanced. So I did a bunch of, well, let's be honest, I had LLMs, I had ChatGPT run loads and loads of algorithms and math and fees to try and figure out if there was a way that I could convert the Comet pool, Comet contract, into softening out this curve. At first, I thought maybe if I had like change the weight, right? So constant product has a 50-50, but the Comet pools, which is a balancer style pool, lets you operate in, imbalanced pools, or I guess, an 80-20, like the blend pool. You can go as high as a 90-10, or I could modify the code and make it a 99-1. But it turns out 50-50 is really good once the pool is balanced. It's getting the pool to a state where it's balanced that's pretty tricky in this particular case. So I liked the way the 50-50 pool looked. I just needed to find a way to like soften out the curve until it got to a 50-50 balanced percentage of kale to XLM fish. And so I started fiddling around with that. Turns out there is a fee. You probably are familiar with the AMM fee, I think is 0.03% or something like that in Stellar. Turns out if you crank that Peppy all the way up to like 95% early on and then gradually slow that fee down to like 0 or something way more reasonable, so long as you set your target at the right place and set the high percentage at the right place early on, you can get this really gentle curve of distribution. And so that's what I did. I modified the Comet pool to make that static 0.03% fee into a dynamic fee, which starts unbelievably high so that we don't distribute all of that XLM fish within the first 5 trades. And instead we slowly go from, I think it's set currently to 95% to 0 at some predetermined target. And so I think I set the target at like $50 worth of kale or something like that. Maybe it was 100, I don't remember, but some predetermined set of kale that I thought was reasonable to consider the pool balanced. At which point the fee is 0, and then the curve looks pretty good. It's a tricky balance. It's not a science, at least not to me. Until we have more data on what the average like cost or price, I guess, of an average small is. But those numbers you can fiddle with. But anyway, all of that to say, I modified the Comets contract to include a bunch of new variables for putting in your fees and your targets. I think if we look at the other contract that I made that actually consumes this, you can see that down in here. We have the tokens that we accept, which is the new Stellar Asset contract, which is the new token. So when I say small token isn't a token. It's just there will be a new small token, XLM Fish and Super Song 100, which will mint a brand new token, mint 1 billion of them. 10 million of them will go to the creator. 990 million will go into the new pool. The other side right now I have set to kale because kale-tility, baby. I have the weights set to 50% to 50%. The balance is on one side, the base amount on the other, currently set to 100 kale. There's a mint or a minimum fee. This is the lowest fee that we're targeting. So once we reach the once we reach the high util balance, which again is this 70,000 kale, which I think is like $50 roughly right now. Once we reach that, I consider the pool healthy, and the fee that we'll be charging will have come down from 95% initially down to 5%. So that's what this min and max fee is. The max fee being when the pool initially starts, when we are at this 100 kale, the fee that we're charging is 95%. What that fee basically means is if this were set to 0, the AMM math would distribute a ridiculous amount of XLM fish. And so we have got to throttle how much XLM fish it's distributing. We throttle it by saying, whatever you were giving, only give 5%. Take 95% of that you were supposed to distribute as per the math. Don't distribute that much, only distribute 5%. And then as we get more kale, as we get closer to this 70,000, we will ease up on this 95% and start heading towards 5%. And the min fee is the fee that we will charge always. And then that 5% is what we use to then distribute out to what I call fee recipients, which are those microtransactions that get paid whenever a small is bought or sold. So that kale, 5% of whatever's coming in and whatever's going out, 5% of it will always go to whatever the fee recipients are. And that's just a vector of addresses and a percentage of this 5% that they can lay claim to. So all of it to say, it's actually pretty simple. The modifications weren't that complex. It was just converting that static 0.03% into a graduated from 95 down to 5. And the rest of it's just comet pool math or balancer style math for an AMM. And operates very similar to Zora. Does it work? Don't know. I mean, I've run a ton of tests, but ultimately we have to play around with small and start actually buying and selling smalls and see how it goes. That is the contract side. And I'm very excited about this because, yes, small, not everybody's into AI music. You should be, but if you're not, the idea of being able to coin things, whether it's content or your own marketplace or whatever, being able to coin things and give microtransactions and kind of have provenance over your content, but codify how you distribute rewards, and kind of have this distribution of tokens mechanic that gently releases your asset out into the wild is really powerful and super cool. And something that certainly wasn't possible in Classic Stellar, but even prior to these modifications, wasn't possible with any of the AMMs we had. So now it is. I am hopeful I'll be able to get maybe the Hoops guys. They have a really cool product I think it's called Flash Pool. They've done some thinking along these lines of like rewarding early purchasers. And so I'm going to explore a little bit more with that team and see if there's any opportunity to partner with them to maybe build a V2 of this, where we kind of throw out maybe some of this Comet stuff and really aim at this AMM contract that's specifically focused at like distributing tokens into an AMM pool of some sort. So this contract is open source. You can find it on my GitHub. I think it's just this one is open source, the new Comet contracts. I think it's under the small branch. I can confirm all of these things easily enough. Yep. And then if you go to, I think this is public. Yeah. If you go to the small, looks like Elliot pasted it. That's good. You can actually get a hold of this. It is worth noting that it was all AI vibe coded. Sonnet 4.5 is amazing. So good. GPT-5, ChatGPT, I think it's just GPT-5 with their new Codex CLI is so good. I've been getting a lot better at prompting things. I'll have it I'll have it do like big audits, but instead of just working through code, I actually have it write big markdown files for audits of what it thinks it should do. And then I have it work through those individually, one at a time. And I'll make it go through like 3 times. I'm like, good job, do it again, find more, make sure you did it right, write more tests, do it again. And until it's like, bro, I can't find anything else. I'm like, good. Well done. Now move on to step 2. And so there ends up being these really large audits. And then it just, tells how it solved it, where it solved it, whether or not it was actually legitimate. I'll have it switch between models. I have found that there's nothing more that AI models love doing than proving other AI models to be stupid and insufficient. So if you pit AI models against each other, they end up finding more stuff. And I think it's very much like real engineers. We're like, who wrote this? This is garbage. I would have done so much better. You just pit them against each other and it ends up producing much better results. And so a lot of this, again, it certainly was all written by AI. So is it good? I have no clue. But the worst thing that could happen is we risk all our kale and become kale poor, which is unfortunate, but I'm willing to risk it at least. And a lot of that, again, not a whole lot changed other than that graduated fee. Cool. So that's the that's the smart contract side of things. I do have a small contracts, which really just consumes that contract and then goes and does some work of making sure that it does the same thing, where it mints creates the new token, mints 10 million to the creator, makes the new pool. So there's a function for that. There's a function that lets you do a batch. So instead of having to mint one at a time, you can mint a bunch all at once. There's another that lets you buy a bunch of smalls all at once, because I added a new feature. Drum roll. I added a new feature for mixtapes on Small, where you can collect all of your smalls into mixtapes and then sell batches. So I'm going to be working on a mixtape. I don't think anybody's made a mixtape. I'm still waiting on Newt to get me a mixtape, but somebody can go out and build themselves some mixtapes. And the cool thing here is it allows you to buy. First, it'll make sure that all of the smalls in that mixtape are minted, and then it will go and purchase all of the smalls in a batch. So rather than having to like individually purchase and find and choose one at a time, you could make a mixtape of like 20 tracks. And then sell the whole mixtape. And now 20 of your tracks all got sold. 20 different microtransactions went out. It's actually kind of sick. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing that in play. There are some limitations. There's a lot of things that happen when a new AMM gets created. And so sometimes multiple transactions are needed to batch all of the mints or all of the purchases, especially if there's a lot of tracks in your mixtape. But I tried to build a modal that walks the user through. Well, let's be honest, AI tried to do it. This is all on Next, by the way. If anybody wants to play around with this, use at your own risk. But hey, it's fun. I'm not sure this is open source yet, but I can certainly open source it soon. But if you go to next.small.xyz, you should see the mixtapes feature as you find bugs. Over on the the Stellar Global Discord, there's now a small channel, which I should probably link to. I'll capture that really quick. So there's a small channel if you find bugs or things aren't working, or you just want to shill your new mixtape. Let me know. I want to make sure that the mixtapes feature is working well, and keep giving AI more prompts for things it needs to fix. One of the big ones being that you have to have Kale now to purchase smalls. So you'll need to get Kale into your account. Your account when you log in is just your address here. If you're farming Kale over on, this is the wrong one. I think I actually have a link to it. Kale Farm. You can just send your Kale to your address. So there's a transfer Kale button. So you can go turn on the miners, boys, turn them back on. Get more Kale from your farm, and then send it over to your address. One of these days, someone will make a smart wallet that lets us not have to make new wallets for every address. Someone needs to superfy Super Peach or productify Super Peach. Which out of context, I realize makes no sense, but Super Peach being my very demo. Oh, there it is. Smart wallet interface that should let you use the same wallet across multiple sites, but it's definitely not production ready yet. So somebody should go and actually do that. But regardless, in this particular case, just you can farm some Kale and then send it over to your address. And then once you've got some Kale in there, you can start minting and buying smalls, which is a pretty cool feeling when I've minted a few of my favorites. So you mint it, and then you can see that I've got 10 million of these tokens. So as the minter, I get the 10 million when I am the minter, but then obviously the creator was set as one of the fee recipients. So whenever somebody buys or sells, whoever created this sick track will get microtransactions, which is super cool. It's got a nice little widget for buying and selling, gives you information. I mean, AI really just somehow knew exactly pretty close to what I wanted. So neat. Then there's the mixtapes feature. If you go and you click mixtapes, it doesn't work well on mobile, which I feel like is probably what everybody went to the site to go look at. So my apologies. Still got to work on the mobile version, but it's a little bit hard to know what the best way of doing that on mobile would be. But on desktop, at least, you can just drag in. Let's find all the gophers. Wait, what are these hedgehogs? I just called hedgehogs gophers. It's unfortunate. I thought there were more, but maybe there's just two. But anyway, you can drag those in, rearrange what the order of them you want them to be is, give it a title, say something witty. You can save drafts and then eventually publish your mixtape, which doesn't actually mint them. So you'll notice, like when you create a new track, for example, you don't have to mint it. The wallet side of these things, unlike Zora, Sora did come out and it's awesome, but it's very different from Zora. So don't get those things confused. When you create, you don't actually have to mint. When you make a mixtape, you don't have to mint. There is a separation between the experience right now of making and curating smalls and actually doing anything blockchain with them. It's kind of opt-in if you want to collect or mint or purchase mixtapes, which is pretty cool. It allows both much easier for folks to just kind of get started and fool around without having to like make actual buy-ins with Kale, but then does allow the kind of lock-in mechanics where somebody else who's like a big fan of a song that wasn't minted yet, you can kind of benefit first from being its initial minter, which is pretty cool. And then the same thing with the mixtapes. I could make a mixtape that I think is sick. Everybody could listen to it, enjoy it, but until you actually go and collect it, it's available to listen to. But in order to actually collect it, somebody's going to need to mint them all and then purchase them. So I kind of like this separation of the two. While they're still intertwined, there's not this requirement where it's like, hey, welcome to this new experiment, spend money on it. You can kind of fiddle around for free, and then once you've found some things that you like, you can start locking in a little bit more, I think that's really cool. All right, so that's most of those pieces. I'll open source. There's the workflow piece, which is on Cloudflare. There's the front end piece. Again, all of this stuff, I mean, it looks pretty cool, but it's completely vibe coded. Like the infinite scrolling of all of these tracks is all vibe coded. The mixtape feature, I mean, it is absolutely incredible what AI is able to pull off now. Oh, there was one other thing that I was having a conversation with somebody at Meridian, which I thought would be so cool, and it's so dangerous, but it would be really fun. Would be this idea of like, what if there was a little button that was like, build your own small.xyz, build your own website, request a feature, or implement a feature, which allowed someone to like prompt out a change that they want to see in the app. And then it actually goes to like GitHub or something and kicks off a model that actually codes it out, but then gives them like a unique URL, right? So it's like, I don't know, maybe it's a subdomain or something, next.elliot.small.xyz, right? He's working on his own, vibe coded version of Small, and he could then go and add new features. But then whenever he shares Small, he shares it with his unique link or URL. And then anytime somebody uses Small off of his URL, he gets like royalty payments for every Small that gets made, because he built the best UI, the UI that everybody wants to use. That would be such a cool and weird way to get like non-devs, but people who like really want new features and want to see a better version of the site, but I don't know how to prioritize their feature requests, or I'm off working on some other project. They could go in here with a chat bot and just start asking for new features, and it codes it all out for them and gives them an actual URL that then they can go and share with all their fans and friends and make money because they built the better UI. That would be so sick. Now that's obviously very dangerous, because he could also say, I want to add a feature that anytime somebody tries to make a transfer of Kale, instead of sending it to where they think it's going to, it actually is going to go to me, and that's my new cool feature. They could probably only trick so many people with that before somebody was like, well, that didn't work. And so hopefully the incentive would be to do good versus do evil, but I think we know how that story goes. So there'd have to be some sort of like approval process or review process, or like, this is a new site, be very, very careful, or here's a log of all the most recent changes that happened. I'm not exactly sure the best way to safeguard it, but that idea of users being able to be developers of sites they love to add new features is so cool. Cool enough that I think the risks, though they're legitimate, we've got to solve those versus saying, let's not do that feature, because that would be so cool. If you could just log into a site and be like, man, I'd like to see these elements changed, or I really hate the way the mixtape feature does this. And if it would just tweak these one little things, people would actually get it. Or this, like, how am I supposed to get kale? You need to be able to buy kale with a credit card. And you add that feature, it gives you a unique URL. And anytime somebody uses it, you get paid. You just turned like all of your users into developers. Well, that's pretty powerful. That would be so cool. To not have to fiddle with making the site myself. I could let my users do it, kind of like I've already done myself as myself. Like, I am a small user and I use AI to code it. Wouldn't it be so cool if other people could do the same thing? That'd be so neat. Okay, so I've talked about that. The last thing I want to mention, sorry, did anybody have a question? I thought I heard somebody say something. No? Okay. The last thing that I wanted to talk about, which I talked a lot about at Meridian, and a lot of people were very interested in it, is this idea of the fee vault. Was it script 3 fee vault v2? So there's a fee vault for the uninitiated. There's this fee vault that essentially sits between Blend and like a user wallet, which essentially allows users to deposit into a fee vault, and then the fee vault manages the interaction or collection of rewards, emissions from Blend. Really cool. Way better. I don't know. Far more intuitive for working with Blend from like a contract perspective than working with Blend directly. And I think there's what's a DeFi index is using this to like do balanced. What's the name of this? DeFi index. Yeah, here. Oops. Oh my goodness. DeFi index is using this to kind of do something really similar. With their vault strategies and stuff, but it's essentially the idea of, instead of having users interact directly with Blend, have them interact with a vault, and then you can handle showing information to a user to claim their rewards, or maybe it does it automatically. I'm using it, and I think I've talked about this a little bit with different folks, so apologies if it's old news, but the essential idea is the fee vault allows users to deposit in to this vault that then claims yield from Blend from those user deposits, and the yield then becomes this pool of money that can be distributed to users in a various number of ways. I'm building a game site where users deposit money into the fee vault. The fee vault collects yield, and then every week, the money that's generated from that yield gets distributed to the gamers as they play games. So I've built a contract that arbitrarily makes 3 factions, and gamers have to pick which faction they want to play for. Players play games, win faction points for their faction, and then the faction with the most points at the end of the day, maybe at the end of the week, depends on how much money we have in the vault. At the end of, let's say, the day, whoever won that day has the most points for their faction. That faction wins all of the money in the vault, all of the fee in the vault, the yield that was generated for that day, and then you can claim the percentage based off of the number of points that you contributed. So let's say you contributed 2% to the total points for that day to your faction. You get 2% of whatever the total yield was. So this is a super cool way to like monetize whatever you want. In my case, for people to play my games, I'm going to give them money if they deposit and then play games, and then they win off of the yield. Why this is cool is because you don't actually lose any money. It's zero loss, right? I deposit $100 to play games. As long as my $100 are deposited, I win. I get a certain number of faction points to contribute to the daily games. But at any point in time, I could always withdraw my $100 and leave the game. I get more faction points the more money I deposit. I get more faction points the longer I'm deposited. There's different knobs and dials you can fiddle with to make it worth people depositing and worth holding for a long time and worth depositing more. Disincentivizing withdrawals, all that stuff has to get worked in to make it work. But this is what the game contract does that I've written. But at the end of the day, the idea is Blend is just generating free money. How much free money obviously is a factor of how much gets deposited, but the more that gets deposited, the more yield that you have to then this like free money to just distribute, in my case, to gamers. This has implications, the fee vault, implications that go way past like just gaming, though I think that's a really cool use case and one that I want to explore. I was talking with somebody, it was Yop from Beans, on ways that this could maybe be interesting for just incentives to any other app, where instead of taking maybe user deposits, though you certainly could, you could take advertiser deposits. So this is something I've thought of for gaming, where I could approach advertisers and say, deposit $100,000 for 2 weeks. You get your $100,000 back at the end of 2 weeks, but I'm going to be taking the yield from those $200,000 to distribute money to my gamers whom you are advertising to for those 2 weeks. So this allows you to take really large deposits, but at a zero loss, where the advertiser will always get their money back. But that $200,000 over 2 weeks will generate quite a lot of yield in Blend right now. So through taking the advertiser route versus just the user deposits route, you are probably enabling, assuming you're able to get those advertisers, you're able to get a much larger amount of yield, which then incentivizes more users, which then incentivizes larger advertisers to make larger deposits for longer periods of time, all with the idea that it's zero loss. And it doesn't necessarily have to be zero loss for the advertisers, right? Once it's worth it, they might be willing to actually give you money that they don't ever get back. But at least early on, while you're growing or bootstrapping something, that incentive of we're going to give you all the money back. Just give us a week. Let's make it worth your time. Again, the idea that you could take that, generate yield that you then give to users. I mean, who knows how many users you can get if you're like, we will give you free money if you play these games and win points for your faction. How much? That's a factor of this like chicken egg sort of from the advertiser, but it's just so much of an easier pitch to an advertiser to say like, deposit $50K for a week and then you get your $50K back. If it doesn't work out, you don't have to stick with us. But if it does work out and we're able to actually get you some value out of that $50K, they may be willing to up their deposit amount or extend the length or give you a good testimonial. I don't know. It's such an interesting idea. And it's all possible because we have these fee vaults and Blend, which generates really good yield. So this is what I'm building with gaming, but it could be for wallets, for basically anything that needs to incentivize users to join. And maybe there's like advertisers that you could excite, or maybe if it's just investors, right? Hey, Mr. Investor, give us $1 million. After a month, you get your $1 million back. If it doesn't work out, or you want to reconfigure your allocation, just a completely different way to do fundraising and user acquisition. Very, very fascinating because of this opportunity to generate yield from user deposits or advertiser deposits. So anyway, I just wanted to share that as something that I've been thinking about, talked about it a lot with folks at Meridian, definitely struck a chord. I'm going to be spending more time on this myself. The big issue right now in pushing anything public for people to play with on my side is when it's connected to gaming and it's connected to money, there's the big, wait, how are you going to prove that games were played fairly in order to like not get absolutely destroyed when you're trying to prove that a user played a game fairly? That's where zero knowledge proofs come in. I may have mentioned before that I'm starting to dabble in that. Picked I thought it would be an easy game. Pong, everybody knows Pong, right? The two paddles and it bounces a ball back and forth. I thought that would be a fun game to start with. Turns out it's pretty difficult to prove, but also provides a really good test bed for generating more complex zero-knowledge proofs. I probably don't need to use zero knowledge because I don't actually care if people know like where the paddles were. I really only care that the game was played fairly. But the zero knowledge stuff with there's a product called Risk Zero that allows you to write what are called circuits. It's like codifying the rules of whatever it is you're trying to do. That's what ends up getting run and turned into a proof, a mathematical proof. Turns out you can turn the rules of Pong into a circuit, send it, the paddle positions, and then using trigonometry, you can ensure that the game was played fairly. So that's what I'm using. I could probably use something else because I don't actually need to obfuscate anything. I just need to prove that the rules of Pong were followed. But at the very least, it provides a good test bed for me to understand how to both write a zero knowledge proving system and then implement it somehow into Stellar in a way that you can actually do this person won, this person lost, give the winner the money type of a thing. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Obviously, I've been spending a ton of time on Small for the past couple of weeks. Now that I've got that in a decent place, I'll probably pivot a bit back to the zero knowledge stuff. Protocol 24 is going to add a bunch of helpers and additional crypto curves to make all of this risk zero knowledge stuff much easier and more native to Sorbonne, to the smart contract protocol. So I'll be fiddling with that. Stay tuned. Keep an eye on this space. Leave the dial on. Don't touch the dial. I don't know. Spend all this time listening to the radio. But yeah, I'll have a lot more to share, hopefully, about that in the coming weeks and months as I play around with that a bit more. But lots of it's an incredible time to be a smart contract developer because of tools, these AI tools that just help write complex contract code and write zero knowledge proofs for me, which otherwise I would never be able to touch because I'm just not that smart and I don't have that kind of time. You won't find too many examples of zero knowledge proof games because it's stupid to do that because of how hard it is to write circuits. But when you've got AI and some token credits, you can just tell AI to do it and it will say yes, yes sir, and do it, which is an amazing thing. So I'm very excited to be playing around with these types of things and then sharing more about them. So keep an eye on the space. I'm going to scroll back through really quick. Did we have any questions? Doesn't look like there's too much. You're a good
I got a question about your small fee graphs that you had earlier.
Yes, sir.
Is there a similar kind of what are the fees, or is there a graph like this, or numbers like this rather, for Zora posts and coins?
That's a great question. No, I don't think so. It would be quite different. Uniswap v4 works so differently than any other AMM. And that was one of the challenges. There aren't any graphs that I'm aware of like this for Zora, and even understanding the way that it works is non-trivial. There's not a lot of technical documentation on how it works. It's more just it does work and trust us. And at the end of the day, even if they had some graphs for how the distribution works, it operates quite differently. So and I don't think we're at a point yet where we could vibe code, or I would feel safe with a vibe coded v4 Uniswap. Plus, there's a lot about Uniswap v4 that's specific to the EVM that would need to be different if we implement it on Stellar, where some things are just much easier on Stellar or more intuitive. And so it wasn't a matter of just just vibe code v4. It would be a different kind of animal. And I don't need all the stuff that Zora is doing because I can just use a graduated fee, and distributing tokens through the Stellar asset contract which the EVM doesn't have was pretty simple. Again, it remains to be seen if the numbers that I typed in and the way that I'm doing it actually works well enough. when it comes to like real distribution, it's really hard to model this stuff because I don't know if let me see if I've got the one that I was actually more interested in was the P&L, the profit and loss graph. So the profit and loss graph of like what money do people stand to make at their purchase point. So you have to assume a lot of stuff, assuming that they all spend the same amount of kale when they buy in, assuming that they sell at the same point. So I think I said at trade 200. So assuming that everybody buys, I think it was 50 cents worth of a token. Assuming that everybody buys 50 cents worth of the token, and then we extrapolate that out to trade 200. How much would each trader make if they sold all of the XLM fish that they got when they bought it for 50? So if they bought for 50 cents, they got a certain amount of XLM fish out. As time goes on, you get less XLM fish out. And so when you sell, A, you'll have less XLM fish, but B, you'll also not have been holding as long. And so it'll be worth a bit less. But what does that profit and loss actually look like? But the problem is this assumes you're the only one that's ever sold any XLM fish at that point in time. And that's just not going to be the case. But modeling an accurate market of buying and selling actually I found it to be quite difficult. You will notice this like first little bump up, and that's because there's an additional there's an additional limit on the amount that you're allowed to change the pool at the first purchase. So you can only buy in 33% of whatever, or 30%, I think it's 33%, 1/3 of the pool at a time. So if there's only 100 kale, you can only change the balance by 30% at a time. And so when you initially buy in, those first few purchases are less than that 50 cents worth. You could only buy a very tiny amount. So the amount of XLM fish you get out is actually quite a bit less. And so at sell 200 or at trade 200, there's a lot of kale in, but you didn't get as much XLM fish out as somebody who bought in later when there was more XLM in. Yeah. And so that 30% change was past that 50 cent mark. It's not terribly complex, but it's a bit complex, and you really don't want this curve to be outrageous. And this curve is pretty aggressive, even as is. So it's really just like a balancing act, both of the distribution curve, but then also the P&L. But the P&L is a bit hard to reason about because no market actually behaves like this. So we really just need more IRL data for this particular Comet balancer pool to see if the numbers I've generated are correct, or if this idea of graduated fee actually makes sense. Right now is obviously linear. You could make it more algorithmic or exponential with that percentage curve, so that it was more aggressive and stayed more aggressive for a longer period of time, which would push this P&L up a little bit. So it's really just a balance of how many people do we actually think are going to be early adopters into a small, how many adopters does it take before it kind of reaches mass adoption and everybody wants in. Hard to say. So I just picked some numbers, did the best math I could, and we'll see what happens. But these numbers, like this is the research that makes or breaks these types of products, because if the monetary model's not right, the idea of monetary incentive just goes away and nobody cares to actually buy in. So that work is important. It's just quite difficult to predict when you don't have any prior data.
Yeah.
Just reading back through these questions. It doesn't look like there's much.
I don't think there were many.
Cool. Alrighty then. Everybody have a fantastic week. Go make some smalls. Go buy, we finally have something fun to spend our kale on. So go buy some smalls from from the community. Request features. Would love to see that that chat over in Stellar Discord, the Stellar Global Discord, popping off with feature requests. Send me your bangers, and we'll have some fun.
How much does it cost to buy a small?
You can pick. To mint, it costs 100 kale. To buy, it's really, you could. Oops! Now I have to mint it. Let me find one that I've actually minted already. I think I did this one. So if I go and I trade and I click buy, I can put in a really small amount of kale if I want to, and then I just don't get very much small out the other end. Where if like I buy 100, actually I don't think I can. I think I can only buy 33 as my cap. I get 16 million out, and so it's more of like this shares idea. So 16 million of 990 million is a little more than 10%. So not bad. And that number obviously goes down the more people, the more kale, just based off of AMM math. So the idea is get in early with a song that you like because you're a fan, and then you want to share it. So the more people collect it, and it's the same idea of Zora. But cool. All right, everybody have a great week, and hustle. What is the title of this one? Hustle and grind. Everybody, hustle and grind. That's the motto. All right. Have a great week, everybody. We'll catch you all in the next one.